to all of the participants, Biochemco 2020, Borobudur International Courses on Heritage Material Conservation in the year of 2020. Thank God we can meet in this beautiful morning, and I hope you are all in the good condition. Dear all participant, conservation expert, heritage conservation staff, and all of the technician of the heritage conservation site all around the world or all around the world. Welcome to the 6th day of Biochemco International Courses. This morning will be laboratory practices. The title is Natural Adhesive and its Application for Cultural Heritage Artifact. In this session will be presented by firstly Mr. Agung Haldoko, who is the conservation researcher. Mr. Agung Haldoko had been working for Borobudur Conservation Office for more of 10 years. And then the second, Mr. Arif Gunawan. Yes, Mr. Arif Gunawan is the research assistant of Borobudur Conservation Office. Has been working for BCO for more about 20 years. It is very experience in laboratory practices. And then the last will be Mr. Linus Setio Adiduto. Yes, he is also the conservation researcher working for Borobudur Conservation Office for more than 6 years. Dear participant, in this morning, we have the laboratory practices guided by the three presenters, Mr. Leliek, Mr. Arif Gunawan, and Mr. Linus will show you the technique, the traditional technique using traditional material also, but researched by the Borobudur Conservation Office to make the natural adhesive and its application. We'll be show you the technique of using the natural adhesive for the heritage artifact, which is the ceramic and also the earthenware from sites in Indonesia or from heritage site of Indonesia. And then during these practices, Mr. Leliek, Mr. Linus, and Mr. Arif Gunawan will show you the technique, the detailed technique, and also the presentation about the natural adhesive that Mr. Leliek Agung had been working for more about 4 years in the PCO. So actually the technique had been adopted by the scientific method, and then the application as we can show you through this laboratory practice is the more about the technique of the application of the natural adhesive. Okay, this is the time is 30 minutes past 10, and we will start this laboratory practice. Okay, to Mr. Leliek Agung Haldoko, Mr. Arif Gunawan, and Mr. Linus Adiduto, the Zoom is yours.
Thank you, Mas Hari, for presenting the event today. Welcome, participants of Biochemco 2020. Welcome back this morning. After last Friday, we shared about the practice on wood conservation and metal conservation with traditional ways. Today we will continue the session. The theme today is natural adhesive for conservation of artifact glowing. The artifact we will use to practice today is a ceramic artifact. As we know, cultural heritage in Indonesia has many types. And one of them are artifacts. And artifacts are movable heritage objects. Among these artifacts are ceramic artifact or wooden artifact. These two artifacts are material of our research to develop natural adhesive to conserve natural cultural heritage. As we know, ceramic is easily broken and made of clay. Therefore, it is fragile to crack or broken. And the causes can be the mass of the material above it, or it could be an accidental, or because of the soluble salt in the ceramic, because it expands when it's dry, and causes the ceramic to crack or break. Mostly ceramics are found in the cultural heritage reserve, underwater cultural heritage. Ceramics have been known as an object with important function in the day-to-day life. And currently, a lot of ceramic artifact could be found in the sinking sites, underwater sites. As we know, Indonesia is an archipelagic country, and most of the territory consists of water. Therefore, we have a lot of sites with underwater material, ships, sunken ships with ceramic loads. And the amount of the discoveries because ceramic is an important commodity. Especially from China in the past. Ceramics found underwater are not always intact. Sometimes they are found broken or in fragments. Therefore, certain effort must be taken to treat these ceramic artifacts. When ceramics are broken, usually they turn into fragments. Therefore, adhesive is necessary to make the fragments intact again. Currently, the conservative practice in Indonesia use reversible material. Therefore, we in Borobudur Conservation Office attempt to develop natural adhesive. This natural adhesive we create from several different materials. Before we did the research, previously we used science acrylic adhesive to conserve the ceramic. In Indonesia, the brand is usually Haldoko. The material is commonly used to conserve ceramic artifacts because it's practical. Because it can be applied on the fragments and it will immediately dry it off. However, this material have several disadvantages. These materials are thermosetting. When the attachment is not done correctly, it will be difficult to reset the fragments. And if can be disattached, it will cause damage to the fragments. As you can see, these ceramic fragments, we try to attach this ceramic fragment several times. In the previous time, we used cyanoacrylic adhesive. After we try to detach it, you can see that the residue here that cannot be removed. It will cause problem that when we try to attach it again, it is not perfectly attached. You can see different cracks here, small cracks, because there are residue of the glue on both sides of the ceramic fragment. This is why cyanoacrylate material usage as adhesive has disadvantages when there's a mistake in attaching the fragments. This is why we in the Borobudur Conservation Office attempt to develop natural adhesive from animal protein. The, the adhesive is created from anchor or gelatin. This is what we call anchor. This is the result of hydrolysis of animal bones and cartilage. This material can be easily sourced in the market. We could purchase this at a material shop. This is approximately $3 per kilogram. Next is this material. This is gelatin. Gelatin powder is similar with anchor. It is a result of hydrolysis of bones and cartilage. This gelatin is a product of hydrolysis from cow bone. This is also easily sourced in the market. Usually this is used for food material, such as for jelly or confectionaries. While anchor, this is the difference between two is just the grade of the material. Anchor is called the technical grade. Gelatin is a food grade product. Price-wise, gelatin is more expensive because it's used for food. This is approximately $10 per kilogram, the gelatin. We also did some research on this. This is Gondorukam. This is pine resin. In Javanese, it's called Gondorukam. This is a resin of the pine tree, processed with turpentine. The solid form is created from the pine resin, processed with turpentine into this solid material. The materials we showed you. The material with the best adhesive effect is the anchor. It is stronger compared to the Gondorukam or the pine resin. And also it's from the same material, but this is stronger. We tend to choose this material because it is more affordable. As I said, before, the use of anchor in ceramic is necessary because this material is reversible. So when a mistake happened during the attachment of the fragments, the attached fragments can be detached without causing damages on the fragments itself. And it will not leave any residue on the surfaces of the fragments. What we did in our research, there are two types of ceramic. Porcelain for porcelain and terracotta. If it's from terracotta, the material has bigger pores. Therefore, you could accept more water. Well, ceramic has higher temperature when it is big. Therefore, it with smaller pores, it absorbs less water. This is how we create adhesive. First, we use electric sieve. We also use the beaker glass, spatula, and brush. We could use brush. In this practice, we will try to show you the use of anchor material for adhesive. For ceramic or terracotta. This is the procedures that we do. From this material, from anchor or gelatin, we dilute them in water. One gelatin by 2 water. For instance, if we use 20 grams of anchor, we used 40 milliliter of water. It's easy to make. We mix the material of gelatin anchor with hot water and then stirring it as we heat it up. After being combined, it is cooled and then stirred again till it thickened. After it's thickened, it means that the material is ready to be used as an adhesive. As the adhesive gets hardened in the container, if the adhesive starts to harden in the container, it can be reheated to melt it again. We will try to show you the procedure. We use 40 milliliter of water. We measure it. We measure anchor as much as 20 grams. This is 20 gram anchor. Meanwhile, we heat the water up. We usually can mix the material after the water has reached about 60 degrees Celsius. We'll wait until it reaches 60 degrees Celsius. This material has a tendency to be easily mixed with hot water. The hotter the water, it will be more easily to dilute. It is now about 70 degrees Celsius, so we can mix the anchor into the water. And now we will stir. So this is how we mix the anchor solution. It may not be as simple or easy as using a prefabricated adhesive. We have to make it ourselves from the beginning. It is not like epoxy resin glue or Haldoko that can be immediately applied. We need to cook this material to ensure that it creates an even solution. If you find that it is not heat enough, you can reheat this. This process will take time. The smell might be like a burnt skin or burnt hair. But the smell will be gone after the adhesive dilution is ready to use, after it's well cooked. We must ensure that the whole anchor is completely diluted and mixed with water. As you can see, this is not yet ready. When it's hot enough, it might froth like this. We can remove it from the heat source. We stir until it's more thick, and then we cool it off. In this condition, as you can see, we do not need to reheat this because it's already hot enough. We just wait and stir until it's more thick. When it's already thick and ready like this, the burnt smell that we smelled earlier is already gone. As we wait for this to cool off and thicken, we will see We'll go back to the slides. Next is the process of attaching the fragments. To attach the fragments of the ceramic, we can use anchor with one anchor with 1 water or 1/2. For ceramic and porcelain type, for ceramic, it is better to use the 1/1 comparison between the anchor and the water because the surface of the ceramic fragments is much more thinner. That's why a thicker adhesive can be applied. However, a 1/2 comparison of anchor can be also applied in ceramic, but it will take more time to dry off to make sure that it's thick enough to be applied. There are several examples of conservation of ceramic that we did. This is an underwater artifact discovered in a wreck ship in a broken condition. As you see, this is the second time we did conservation. Second time we tried to join the fragments. This time there are fragments that we could not find. So the fragment is missing, so that's why there's a hole in this plate. As you see the condition of this ceramic artifact, we last joined them in 2012. As we can see, the joint parts are still in good condition. There are no visible stains in the joint parts. It does not detach. And it does not have mold or eaten by bugs. Because as we know, the protein-based material is prone to mold or bugs. But the condition of this ceramic sample that we joined, you can see that it's free from molds or bugs, and this is done 8 years ago. The second material, this is a terracotta artifact. We joined the fragment on this one. We see that we join the fragments with gelatin dilution of 1/2. The reason that we use the less thick solution, because we expect that the less thick solution will seep into the pores of the terracotta. So it is hoped that it will be attached more strongly. We wait for the adhesive that we cook to be more thicken. We also run some tests, strength test. Because we have the equipment to test the shear strength, that's what we did. We test the adhesive strength using anchor. With a pressure of 40.57 kilogram per centimeter square. This material is strong enough once it's dried. The glue solution is thickened. But you can see that it's still too hot. So it's not ready to be used yet. It needs to be cooled off more. We need to wait until this adhesive solution is cool enough. We also run some heating tests on the adhesive. We put the joint fragments, the repaired ceramic, into an oven with the temperature between 70 degrees Celsius to 100 degrees Celsius. For 60 minutes for each temperature range. When the repaired ceramic is heated up in the oven, the adhesive remains stick, so the joint part is not getting loose. Why we call this type adhesive as reversible? Because the adhesive, the natural adhesive that we use is water soluble. As we could see, if we immerse the ceramic in water, the adhesive will be dissolved in water. It will become loose and the joint parts will be detached. This shows the weakness of the material, but it could be an advantage of the material. Ceramic artifact repaired with animal-based protein adhesive must be stored indoor. It must be kept away from direct water contact, such as rainwater. So the weakness of the artifact being repaired using this natural adhesive, it cannot be in contact with any type of water. But this is also its most advantage point, because if you make mistake in joining them during repair, you can easily fix them. If we try to dissolve the glue, it is better to use hot water because it will dissolve faster, the adhesive. These are several types of activities that we did in the Borobudur Conservation Office on the application of the usage of natural adhesive, to join fragments of terracotta artifact. We found a terracotta water pot with 50 centimeter diameter and about 60 or 70 in height, and it was found buried in soil. There we tried to lift it using polyurethane. But during excavation, an error happened. The terracotta was broken in several fragments during excavation. And then we cleaned the fragments of this terracotta pot and brought it back to our laboratory. This is the process of repairing the broken terracotta. So the process of repair using animal protein adhesive It will require a longer time. It has to be attached one by one. After the fragments are already joined, after the fragments are joined, we must wait until the adhesive is hardened and dry enough before we join it with another fragment. So we have to join each part separately while waiting for it to dry. And this will take relatively longer time compared to when we use synthetic adhesive. Because the adhesive itself might take about 20 minutes to dry off. To achieve the strongest adhesive effect that we want, it will take 4 to 5 hours. But after the initial 20 minutes, we can begin attaching a different fragment. Why did we decide to use a natural adhesive to this terracotta? But because the process itself is quite complicated. We cannot get the correct format or shape with just one attempt. When there's an error or a mistake in joining the fragments, we have to repeat the process all over again. And this is where the natural adhesive comes handy. Because when there's an error or mistake in joining the fragments, we can repeat the process all over again. The repair of this terracotta took days until it could be in the original form. This is the camouflage process that we did on the pot. We could see that there are cracks between the fragments. So to camouflage the cracks, we use a solution anchor with a crushed terracotta material, brick material into the solution, and then we applied it on the pot. And that's the result that we get. As you can see, the result. Currently, the repaired terracotta pot is put in the space where we keep the heritage objects. The reason why we use the natural adhesive is because on the first attempt of joining the fragments and repair it, we didn't get it correct. We didn't always get it correct in the first attempt. So we have to detach it and try to find the right fragments and then retouch them again. Now the adhesive that we cooked at the beginning is ready to be applied. We have to ensure the position of the fragments. To reduce the reset, we need to repeat the touching process. For easy application, we use brush like this. We just apply the glue at the surface. It will be better or stronger if the adhesive is applied on both sides of the fragments that will be joined. It will be stronger as the two surfaces will have adhesive on them. This type of adhesive requires patience because it will take longer time for it to dry off. And don't worry if you see any excess like this because we can clean it up with hot water later on. To help so that we don't have to hold the pieces of fragments, we can use Plasticine to hold the pieces in place, like a Play-Doh. You can find this in the market. It will help to keep the fragments in place as we wait for the glue to dry off. So we apply this to two different fragments as well as at once before we attach the other part to it. This is an attempt to repair wooden artifact. The artifact we use in our research is new. It's not really an artifact. It's just for sample. We try to cut this artifact in several points on the leg and head. And we try to repair it using an anchor of 1x2, one anchor and 2 parts of water. As we could see that the joint parts is neat enough. There's a minimal residue. can hardly see where the parts are joined. On the neck, on the arm, and on the legs. You can hardly see that it was joined. The neatness of the joint in repairing artifacts will also depend on your diligence and carefulness in applying the glue. Additional ingredients if necessary. If you have worries about the adhesive, if there are bugs in your place, or if you worry about fungus or mold growth, protein-based natural adhesive is prone to fungus, mold growth, or being eaten by insects. To prevent this, we could add 1% of aluminum sulfate to the protein-based adhesive and bus and recite this tawas. Usually this is used to help clean water. We just use 1% of this material, aluminum sulfate, and dilute it with water that we will be used to create an adhesive solution when it's mixed with gelatin. You can use this or not use this, depends on your necessity. What we show you in this laboratory practice, we didn't add the aluminum sulfate into the adhesive solution because based on our experience here, like you can see in this ceramic plate, this was joined 8 years ago and we see no trace of fungi or mold or insect eating the adhesive. So we didn't use the aluminum sulfate because it's not necessary yet, and it's still, and we tried to use it and it's still attached well. Addition of these additional ingredients, the aluminum sulfate, can speed up the process of drying the adhesive. As you can see, this is the terracotta artifact that we joined. We let it dry until it's really, really dry. And then after we are sure that it's completely dry, we can lift it. Usually in 20 minutes it's already dry, but to ensure optimum adhesive effect, we will wait for 1 day usually. So we did an attachment prior and you can see the result. This is strong enough. It will not detach. It will remain intact unless it is put outside of the room and exposed to rainwater. While we wait for this to dry, we can open up a discussion forum.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Leliek, Mr. Arif Gunawan, and Mr. Linus Setio Adi Duto. Dear participant, we have already see the laboratory practices by Mr. Leliek and college, and try to consolidate the pottery with the useful of natural adhesive, which is we all know there is anchor, there is gelatin, and also condoricum using to consolidate the ceramic and also the pottery. The practices by Mr. Lili, Mr. Gunawan, and Mr. Linus is very useful, very easy, and it's not expensive because Mr. Lili said uh, less than $2 maybe we have a kilo of anchor to make the natural glue or natural adhesive for conservating the pottery. And we have still plenty of time, approximately 45 minutes for discussion, while Mr. Arif Gunawan is now gluing the underwater ceramics using the natural adhesive. As Mr. Leliek says, he used also the same natural adhesive with his anchor. Okay, is there any question for the participant or maybe some statement for the participant related to this morning laboratory practices? As we all already know that Borobudur Conservation Office starting in 2011 is starting to researching the natural material using for conservation of heritage artifact. So we are closely use natural or traditional technique for conserving the heritage artifact now. Is there any question or is there any statement for the participant? I think not yet, yes. Yeah, there is one question from I don't know Miss Katina. So I will invite Miss Katina, please. Straightly asking question for Mr. Lili. Miss Katina, from the question of Mr. Katina, please straight forward to ask question for Mr. Lili, or I will help you to communicate with me with Mr. Lili. Mr. Katina, yes.
Yes, good.
Miss Katina, okay, thank you.
Ya, good morning. Pak Lili, I have a question. Just anchor in Indonesian. What's this in Indonesian? That's all. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Lili, please.
Ya, tadi
So if we try to find materials shop, we just say it's anchor. So this material in the past, like before the 2000s, if you know this material is used to put in the thread that is used to play kite in Indonesia. This cuts the glass powder in the thread to play kite. So you can buy in the material store and say you seek for anchor. In the past, this is used for kite. In Indonesia, you can buy it. If you say it's angkor or ancur, the seller in Indonesia will know. This you can find this in old materials shop. They will know about this material. You can get this very easily. Because several years ago, a friend in Sangiran who joined the course, in 2016, our colleague tried to develop the usage of anchor to attach fossil fragments in Sangiran. From our research in 2012, our colleagues in BPS Sangiran also developed the usage of this type of adhesive to join fossil fragments, as the material is very easy to be sourced in Indonesia. So there's no specific name. We say it's angkor or ancur in Indonesia. However, if you find it difficult to find anchor, you can just use gelatin. Basically, they're of the same material, just different grades. Gelatin has higher grade than anchor, that's why it's more expensive. If anchor is only $3 per kilogram, gelatin will probably cost $10 per kilogram. You can find gelatin in food produce stores, like baking product stores.
Thank you very much, Mr. Leliek, and also thank you very much to Miss Katina from Afandi Museum. The next question or the next opinion, I will invite the audio MCR. I don't know yet. I don't know the name, maybe. Mr. Audio MCR, please get forward to ask question to Mr. Leliek. Mr. Audio, are you online? Yes. Mr. Audio. Okay, I will. Yes. The question for Mr. Leliek is the using of anchor for an inventory of the museum collection. Jadi Mas Leli, ini ada pertanyaan dari Mr. Audio bahwa dia telah menggunakan angkor dan melakukan fotografi, dan beberapa di antaranya ada koleksi keramik yang telah pecah, ada koleksi keramik yang telah pecah, yang juga menggunakan perekat berupa angkor. Jadi ada koleksi museum berupa keramik yang dilekatkan dengan angkor, dan kemudian ketika dia memfoto itu sudah pecah. Apakah ada kesalahan? Kira-kira kesalahannya di mana ini, Pak Leli? Mungkin bisa disampaikan.
Thank you for the question. So you ask that if applied, you've applied the anchor adhesive on the ceramic collection and it's loose fragments. You want to know the error in the application, possible error of the application. From our experience, if you apply this in accordance with the procedure, as you can see in this ceramic sample, it's broken into several fragments. We did this with the anchor 8 years ago, and you can see that it's still intact at the parts that we joined. So if it's loose or detached, there must be an error in the attaching process and the procedure when you repair it. In the joint process as displayed by Mas Gunawan, so you apply the adhesive on both surfaces of the fragments that you want to join. So you make sure on the joint surfaces, you apply adhesive on both surfaces. So not just one side, you have to apply the adhesive on both surfaces that you're about to join. There's a possibility that when you join the surfaces, the solution is not thick enough, so it's still too thin. So it could be that the adhesive solution that you apply is not thick enough, so it's still runny. We have to ensure that the adhesive solution is thick enough. Hopefully we could show you how thick the solution should be. It should be this thick. If it's this thick, we make sure that it is this thick the solution before we apply. If it's still runny, there's a risk that the part will be detached. If you apply the correct procedure, but the parts are still detached, if you do the procedure correctly, we are confident that it will not be detached, the fragments that you joined, like this one. This one has so many fragments. If we do the procedure correctly, it will be safe and there are no loose fragments in the ceramic plate. There's also a possibility of an external factor. Like the humidity of the room where you start the repaired ceramic. If the room is it has high humidity and happens in a very long time, about 90% humidity in a continuous condition for a very long time, it might be able to just disrupt or dissolve the joint fragments. We make sure that the procedure is correct, and then we make sure that the room where we store it is not too humid.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Leliek. Next, I will invite, if still online, Mr. Jan Emmanuel. Mr. Jan Emmanuel, could you please straightforward asking question to Mr. Leliek as on your chat? If you want to ask question, the equivalent of Anchor, please, Mr. Jan Emmanuel. Yes.
So if I understand correctly, you ask if if anchor is the same with plastic resin glue. If we see the name plastic resin glue is different from anchor. If you see the name plastic resin, it means that it is resin with the material being made from plastic or polymer. It is different from anchor because anchor has no synthetic element. It's natural. So anchor is really natural product, while plastic resin is a synthetic material. And usually plastic resin material is not reversible in its uses. Although I have never seen a specific plastic resin glue material, but usually it's not reversible. Or maybe I haven't seen a specific material on this. Please share your knowledge. But I think these are two different materials.
Thank you, Mr. Leliek. Yeah. Next question, I will invite for online Miss Harpreet Tandai, please.
Yeah. Am I audible?
Yes, yes, clear.
Okay. Thank you very much for this interesting practical demonstration. So I wanted to ask, the object which has been treated 8 years ago, has it been kept in a museum like during all these 8 years, or it has been exposed to an open environment? So without control. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the question, Ms. Harpreet. That I have, you have the question about the artifact that has been kept in the environment and the museum. It has the special condition, maybe kind of treatment for the artifact that is gluing with the anchor inside the museum or outside the museum. If it has any difference treatment.
Ya, terima kasih.
Thank you. Ms. Harpreet. The ceramic that repair, we store in a room with a very controlled condition, very small fluctuation. The humidity is about 40 to 60%. So we keep the room in controlled condition. We have no other treatment applied. So it's naturally like that. Problems usually occur if the fluctuation of humidity is too high, like if you put on air conditioner during the day and turn it off during the night. So the fluctuation of the humidity of the room will be too high, and this will cause problems. Usually that will cause problem in an artifact joint with natural adhesive. So we do not do any the room natural condition is not extreme. The room where we start the ceramic there's no enough water or humidity that will disrupt the adhesive that we use to join this ceramic fragment. If we know that the humidity in our museum is stable, so there's no high fluctuation between the humidity during the day and the night. If you want to turn off the aircon, do not turn it off. It just have to be turned on continuously to maintain the humidity level. This is to keep the humidity fluctuation minimum. So that's probably what I can answer.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lily, and also Ms. Harpreet for the question. The key is about the humidity and temperature fluctuation, which is applied. Also, we have to manage the fluctuation because the artifact that we are consolidating by using the anchor need some treatment in correlation with the relative humidity and also the temperature. And then, is there anyone want to ask to Mr. Lily? Please do read the chat or maybe raise your hand or straightforward asking the question to Mr. Lily and college. We still have plenty of time, maybe about 15 minutes for this session, the laboratory practices. And Mr. Leliek, how is the condition of the ceramic you are gluing with the anchor?
Okay, we joined these ceramic fragments. This sample we tried to join them several times already. This is about probably third or fourth time we tried to join these fragments. In the beginning, we used Haldoko glue to join these fragments. As you can see, when it's detached, it creates gaps in the crack because there are residue of the glue on the surfaces of the fragment. And the second attempt, we reattach the fragments using gelatin or anchor. As you can see the difference with this one, we attach the fragments in the first attempt with gelatin directly, so we don't use any material. You can see that there are no gaps in between the cracks of the fragment, so it's more neat. You cannot really see where the joints are being joined. The surface will be more smooth. Or like this one. This is terracotta. We joined the fragments here. If we want to detach the fragments that we joined using natural adhesive, we can just use water. This is already joined. We use hot water if we want to loosen the adhesive. We're going to try to reverse the process of repair here. This is hot water. It does take time to dissolve the adhesive, the natural adhesive that we used. You can see where the bubbles are. These are the fragments where we joined the fragments with the natural adhesive. And the glue is already dissolving. So we don't need to worry if we're going, this process we're going to damage the terracotta because it was created with high temperature. So 80 degrees Celsius water will be safe with for the terracotta. You can see it's already coming off. As you can see, the glue is already dissolved. If we want to further clean the surface where we applied the adhesive, we just brush it off. We wait until it's soft enough in the water and then we brush it off, it will be clean again. So the adhesive will not leave any residue on the surface of the fragment. You can see the adhesive floats on the surface of the water. So this was why we said that it's a reversible adhesive. The fragments will return to its original shape without leaving any residue of the glue on the surface of the fragment. If there's still residue, we can just clean it with a brush like this. So we really do not need to worry that we will leave residue of the glue when using this natural adhesive because it will be clean. So it's easy for us. When we wish to detach the fragments, we just use hot water, less than 5 minutes, it's already detached. If we can use cold water, but it will probably take longer for the adhesive to dissolve. We will not try to dissolve the glue with this ceramic plate because the process to attach it is really tricky. It will take a lot of time to detach the ceramic fragments with this one, so we'll just use the terracotta plate as an example. This is the plate that we glued earlier. The glue is dried off. This is not yet the optimum ideal condition that we want it to be, but if we touch it, several parts will still have a still wet glue. So we need to let it really, really dry. We have to leave it until it's dry. On the safe side, we could just leave it for about 4 hours or the whole day to make sure that the glue really dried off. Well, this one, the ceramic is really thin, so I'm not sure it's already dried off and safe to be lifted. We shall try. Oh, this one it's already dried off the glue, and this is automated in an Agung condition. So I'm holding it at the center because I don't dare to touch any part of the fragments. I fear that it will lose and detach. And that is our laboratory practice that we can show you today. Or you have any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Leliek, for the excellent practices, gluing the pottery and also the underwater ceramics. And what I read in the chat from Miss Ari Setianingrum to Miss Ari Setianingrum, do you want to be online and straightforward asking question to Mr. Leliek, please? Miss Ari, do you want to ask the question straightforward to Mr. Leliek, or I will ask Mr. Leliek and I read your question?
Ya, jadi yang pertama mungkin ada pertanyaan lagi.
It is best to prepare the solution in the amount necessary. It is best that we just cook it once. Although for this one, maybe in several hours we can still use it, but if we leave it for several days, it's not. We have to. If we leave it for several days, we need to discard it because there's a possibility of fungi or mold growing in the leftover of the adhesive. So this adhesive, if it's thick like this and it's still wet, it's not completely dry. If you leave it for days, there's a risk of mold. But in terms of application of the glue in the artifact, it will be safe because it's really thin layers of it. So it's really dry. So it's best to prepare it for one-time usage. So we just prepare what is necessary amount. We don't make like in big batch. If in another occasion we need to prepare an artifact, we will cook another batch of this adhesive solution. So when it's already dissolved like this in a solution, it does have an expiry date because there's a risk of mold and fungi growing in it. If it's still uncooked like this, it literally has no expiry date. Actually, we bought this 8 years ago when we first did research on the ceramic repair. So we can still use this. Is there any specific container? For the material, we do not need any specific container. You can just use plastic container. Make sure you keep it dry. But for attached material, the artifact on the repaired artifacts, using this adhesive, you make sure that you keep it in a place where it's not humid or with a little fluctuation in the humidity.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Lili. Next question, what I read from the chat from Ms. Sundari Desi Nuryanti. The question is about what is the difference between ancor lempeng, ancor otot or mutiara, and ancor matang. What is the differences, Mr. Lili? Can you mention it?
Ya, untuk
Ms. Sundari asks, about several types of anchors, anchor lempeng, anchor otot, mutiara, or anchor matang, if there are differences in these kinds of material. As far as I know, perhaps we could find a different reference, but as far as I know, but anchor has one main material, which is the hydrolysis of protein. Although it may have several forms, like grains like this or sheets, it is made from the same material. There might be a slight difference. Perhaps there's an anchor made from the skin of the cow or the bone of the cow or other materials. But basically it's a protein hydrolysis from animal. So you could use all of them.
Thank you, Mr. Leliek, for the answer of the question from Ms. Sundari. Last but not least, there is question from Ms. Nurul Fadilah. So Ms. Nurul Fadilah, are you online? Do you want to ask questions straightforward to Mr. Leliek, please? We have still some 4 or 3 minutes. Please, Mr. Nurul Fadilah. Miss Nurul Fadilah,
Yes.
sorry.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can my voice can hear clearly?
Yes, clear.
Okay. Mas Lili, and I want to share the information because in Sangiran we use Anchor as adhesive natural for wholesale. When we make Anchor as adhesive, sometimes we found a bubble, and I think it's so much. I mean that what is effect and for the strength of our joint in posture. Yes. Okay, maybe it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nurul, for the question. Based on her experience in Sangira, when using anchor in the research to repair or join the collection, sometimes there are bubbles or many bubbles in the joint. Whether it affects the strength of the joint material or not. So when we prepare the adhesive, it is boiled. We cook it. As you can see, when we boil it, there are froths. There will be many bubbles in the solution when we cook it. Theoretically, adhesive with bubbles will have different of strengths. Because when bubbles are present in the adhesive, not many parts surface of the joint material will be attached strongly. However, based on our experience, we haven't noticed any significant difference in the result on adhesive with bubbles or no bubbles. For instance, this one, we will try to show you. Like here, when it is applied, the adhesive here, when the caps are quite big, there will be bubbles in the caps. Compared to this one, you might find bubbles if you observe it using a microscope in this because it has a finer surface grain. We saw no significant difference in the result of the joint surfaces, whether or not the adhesive has bubble because it remains attached. But theoretically, there should be a difference of strength in the joint if it has bubbles in the adhesive or if the adhesive has less bubble. So prior to applying the adhesive, you have to ensure that the adhesive solution we make has very little bubble. To anticipate, we need to make sure that the solution has little bubble. But otherwise, there shouldn't be any problem because the adhesive is quite strong. But so far, we saw no significant differences. We saw that it did not break apart easily if there's a bubble in the adhesive that we made.
Thank you very much, Mr. Leliek. Maybe from Ms. Nurul is the last question for this laboratory practices this morning. And maybe is there any conclusion for Mr. Leliek, Mr. Linus, and Mr. Arif Gunawan? Please, would you mind Mr. Arif Gunawan and Mr. Linus to closer in front of the camera so that we have the image of you? Yes.
Ya,
Please.
terima kasih.
Thank you for your attention of the participants of Biochemco 2020 for attending the laboratory practice we held today. And to close the session, we would like to give you a little conclusion. To joint artifacts that are stored indoor or inside the room, such as ceramic or wooden statue, we could apply adhesive that are reversible. Because this type of adhesive, we do not need to worry when we made an error or mistake in the process of repairing the artifact. We could just easily detach them. Also, the adhesive makes it easier. It is strong when it's already dry. The adhesive strength is hold strong when it's dry, but it's also easily detachable when it is dissolved with water. It's very easy to be made, and the material is very affordable and easy to be sourced, and it's strong and it lasts a long time. Thank you. On behalf of my colleagues, Mas Arifnan and Mas Linus, thank you very much for your attention. Please pardon us if during the laboratory practice this morning, there are errors. We are returning this session back to the moderator.
Thank you very much, Mr. Leliek, Mr. Arif Gunawan, and Mr. Linus. Participant, conservation expert, and heritage conservation staff, and also the participant which attend to this laboratory practice this morning. If I can summarize that Borobudur Conservation Office has been made some research about the natural and traditional techniques of conservation or the heritage conservation using the natural and traditional techniques. And it was very useful, this technique that Mr. Lili and colleagues practices by this session, and hopefully the session will have fruitful to you all for conservation for doing the conservation of heritage material, especially the heritage artifact, which is very important to our history. Thank you very much, Mr. Lili. Once again, thank you very much for the participant who is asking the question, and I will end this session. Good afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you very